Did the emancipation movement gain any traction in the immediate aftermath of the revolution? And if so, what might be some of those variations from state to state in that regard?
Yes, well, there certainly were different movements that had begun before the revolution and had gotten momentum during the revolution. I mean, one of those was the Continental Association that was passed by the First Continental Congress and repeated by the Second Continental Congress that prohibited the importation or purchase of slaves. It was not a humanitarian effort. It was not a moralistic. It was a pure and out simple economic measure to bring pressure upon British slave interests. The Royal African Society was Royal African Company, I should say, was heavily involved in moving slaves from Africa to the New World, and so that kind of economic pressure was put upon the British to stop slavery. Uh, and most of the states, most of the colonies and states abided by that recommendation. Uh, there were, however, no laws that were passed to prohibit the slave trade. And so once independence was achieved, you find that there, on an individual basis, some states do reinstitute the slave trade, but eventually that is stopped in most of the states. And in fact, by 1787, when the Constitutional Convention meets, only Georgia has the slave trade that's open. All the other states, 12 other states, have closed the African slave trade, and that takes place. I mean, formally now with a act of the legislature after the revolution. That takes the place of the Continental Association. There's the establishment of abolition societies throughout the country, mainly in the North again, to advocate emancipation, but more likely a gradual emancipation and also an amelioration of the condition of slaves during peacetime now, and then also education and training of Black children so that they have an opportunity to be self-employed, to be employed, I should say, and not become a ward of the state. And so you have that movement that pretty much gets really underway in the mid 1780s, only a couple years after the end of the war. And then you get also the concept of gradual emancipation, which starts with Pennsylvania in 1780. And what that provides is that from a certain period, they pinpoint a date. From that point on, all children born to enslaved women are to be considered free. The condition of a child that's born is dependent upon the mother of the child. And so if the child is born to a slave woman, even though the father was white, even though the child looked white, that child would be a slave because it was born of a slave mother. If a child was born of a free woman and the father was a slave, that child, even if the child had Negroid features, would still be considered a free person because the mother was free. And so these gradual emancipation laws, starting with Pennsylvania in 1780, provided that from a certain date, all children born to slave mothers would be free. They would stay with the mother until they reached adulthood, at which time they would be allowed to go away. And the one of the um, measures that allowed such acts to pass was what's the age of maturity? What's the adult age? In Pennsylvania, they made it 28. So I mean, everybody used 21 for males and 18 for females at this time as the age of maturity, but not in these acts of emancipation, these gradual acts. They're often much higher age, so that the children stay with the mothers for a longer period of time. It's interesting that Thomas Paine was serving as the assistant clerk of the Pennsylvania Assembly. He wrote the preamble of the Pennsylvania Emancipation Law. And so other states follow suit, advocating emancipation in the North only, not in the South.